very special place today. We are actually at the very tippity top of Broadview Towers, which was originally known as the Broadview Hotel here in Emporia. So this is a little bit different type of register than what we've done in the past. Previously, what we've been talking about have been on the National Register. This one, however, is on the State Register, and the State Register helps talk about the history of the state itself and gives you an idea of what was happening in the state at the time that the was built, and throughout history. So this hotel was actually built on the site of the Whitley Hotel, which had burned down in the late 19-teens, 20s. It had been a very popular venue because hotels weren't just like a place for people to stay. Often, like they are now, they were a place for community centers, like you would have conventions and such there. So once the Whitley burned down, they were very anxious to get another hotel built in this location because it is so central in Emporia. So they got a whole bunch of people together to raise money for a hotel and decided to hire Mr. Seedhoff, who had built other hotels. So he built this hotel and started about 1922, and by 1923 it was open for business. Now there were some pretty interesting happenings in the very beginning of the hotel. One of the first conventions that the hotel ever held was for the Ku Klux Klan, which is not the nicest convention to have. In fact, it made so many people angry that William Allen White, who was very well known for his hatred of the KKK, told the manager to either turn over the guest list or not have any advertising space in the Emporia Gazette. Now, because this was a brand new hotel, obviously they're going to want the advertising space. So they did eventually give him the names. Had this really rocky beginning of the history, but afterwards it actually became an incredibly popular place in town. It had all sorts of things. It had like a tea room. Basically, like it was almost like a little mall almost, because it had all of these little fancy rooms that you could go into that would have different things. Starting in about the 1950s, 1960s, they added on an addition, which we are now in. It was actually a watchtower to watch for Russian spy planes. Well, women would actually come up here and sit up here and look for spy planes. They would have like a little book that would tell them what the different types of planes were and stuff like that. And they even had a red phone that they could call if they spotted planes. Unfortunately, we can't use the phone. The phone cord has been cut. So, we're not going to be making any calls to any, government agencies today. But, if it rings, we'll have a problem. I did not realize how much you could actually see from up here. Like that's wild. By that point, by the 1950s, really even after like the roaring 20s itself with the Great Depression and everything, really the hotel industry kind of started not declining necessarily, but it wasn't nearly as popular and nearly as important to a town's business as it was. You start seeing a shift after the Great Depression, because people aren't having the money to come and spend to just hang out. I mean, like even residents of Emporia were just coming and staying at the hotel because it was so new and fancy and everything. So once you kind of hit that depression, you start seeing that decline because people don't have the money to spend on really fancy things anymore. So you actually see this shift from where hotels were huge centers of commercial for the community, and you start seeing it become less and less, which is kind of disappointing because you want these places that people can come and gather. In '74, they actually renovated it and converted it into Broadview Towers, so it's actually apartments now, and it has remained that way ever since. But there's a lot of really interesting things. It is one of the biggest buildings in Emporia. It's located very centrally. It's right on Merchant, which is actually part of that historic downtown district that we had been talking about, and it's also on 6th, which is a major commercial highway. So whenever it was in its heyday, there was a lot of business to be had here. So that's why I think that it's really nice that they actually ended up converting this into apartments, simply because it still is able to serve its community in that way. Sure, it may have served its community in a different way in the past, but it's still serving its community here today.